We will continue our discussion, and I'm the moderator of this third panel. My name is Gabrielle Freitag, and I'm the executive director of the German Association for East European Studies. And it is really an honor for me to moderate this panel. And I really see two challenges. One, of course, is that this is the panel after lunch. So we should really make sure to keep you awake. The other one is that my colleague, Andrei Kulikov, so far has done a wonderful job in moderating. So thanks again for that. And but I'm looking forward to an interesting third panel discussion here. What is our topic? Our topic is the links between political and civil society actors in making Europe a more secure and conflict-resilient space. And we will have a special look at the role of the EU. It has been mentioned several times today, but I will repeat it in the beginning. The Russian war against Ukraine, it is a mortal threat to the people who are living in Ukraine. It threatens Ukraine's sovereignty and its survival as an independent state. But what has also already been said, in a broader perspective, this war also threatens the credibility, the unity, and maybe also the existence of the EU. I think this has been stressed in the former panel, and we should keep this in mind. So Ukraine certainly depends on the EU, it depends on financial support, it depends on the delivery of weapons, we have heard this, and it depends of course on constant solidarity. But vice versa, and I think this is also very important, the EU also depends on a strong Ukraine that counters the military attack and counters economic and propaganda attacks. Propaganda, of course, is something we maybe should also have a closer look at. And this is important to re-establish sustainable peace in Europe. And I also think that sustainable peace is what we should be aiming at. So this panel now will discuss the preconditions and mechanisms to establish and preserve a sound and democratic Europe, and we will take a special look at the role of the EU in strengthening ties between political and civil society actors in this aim. And I'm happy to introduce our speakers, our discussants to you. We have a mixed panel with representatives from the political sphere, EU bodies and civil society. And as you see, most of our panels are online. So I'm very happy that all of them have managed to join us here. And my colleague Wilfried Jilge, and I will start in an alphabetic order to introduce the speakers. My colleague Wilfried Jilge here to my right is the only one in person here. So Wilfried, thank you very much for joining us. Wilfried Jilge is an expert at the Center for International Peace Operations, Berlin, with a special focus on Eastern Europe and Ukraine. He is an associate fellow at the German Council for Foreign Policy, the so-called DGAP. He was a member of the Bertelsmann Strategic Group Key States of the project European Neighborhood Strategies, and has been ever since a board member of the German-Ukrainian Civil Society Forum, Kiewer Gespräche, Kiev Dialogue. So Wilfried, thank you for joining us. So Karin Krokstäde, I think, is also with us here. She's deputy head of the Ukraine division of the European Union External Action Service, so the Europäischer Auswärtiger Dienst. Formerly worked at the European External Action Service on Yemen and the Gulf countries, on the United States and Canada, and as advisor for equal opportunities and careers. Sergey Lagodinsky. Sergey Lagodinsky is a member of the European Parliament based in Brussels, Strasbourg, and the representative of the Greens European Free Alliance. He is a chair of the European Parliament's delegation to the EU-Turkey Joint Parliamentary Committee, and the Greens EFA spokesman for EU-Turkey and EU-Russia relations, and joining us in this regard. So, and by education, Sergey is a German lawyer. Tetyana Pechonchyk Pechonchyk, is Executive Director of the Information Center for Human Rights, Zmina, is a Ukrainian human rights activist and journalist, worked in the Ukrainian news agency Union as an editor of the special project Human Rights, and is a member of the Commission for Journalistic Ethics. And she also is author of a number of articles on occupied Donbass and Crimea. So last but not least, I welcome Georg Ziegler here. He is deputy head of the Ukraine support group of the European Commission, previously worked on the enlargement of the EU to Central and Eastern Europe, was deputy head of the task force of the Turkish Cypriot community, and also deputy head of the unit responsible for Bosnia and Herzegovina and Albania. So thanks to all our speakers here. And we will have a slightly changed format now. We will have a discussion here among the panelists for about 45 minutes, and will then open for questions and comments from your side. And so we are open, of course, for questions from the audience here in the room and for questions from those who are attending online. And Yekaterina Morocco will facilitate questions from those who join us online. And Roberta, who is sitting here right in front of me, will again facilitate the microphone for those of you in the room who have questions. So, as I said, we will talk about resilience now. So what does Europe need to become more resilient? And interestingly enough, I think the term resilience has been very prominent in the European discourse ever since 2014, ever since the start of the war in Ukraine. So, but if we are going to discuss this concept of resilience, I think we should have a closer understanding of what this means, Sergey. And this, as a politician, would be my first question to you. What, from a political point of view, is the essence of resilience?
Well, I don't know about the political point of view. First of all, thank you. Nice to see you. Nice to see both of you. There in Berlin, I assume. I think that the important point for me with resilience is what resilience actually stands for. It's the ability of an entity or an item to take and retake the shape that it had before the stress test or the attack. And for me, this means that it is our ability to remain democratic, remain a vivid, liberal democracy with strong civil rights, civil liberties, and democratic institutions, despite all the pressure and the attacks from outside. This is what I understand under resilience. And that's why I think in many cases it is being substituted by a kind of an ability to fight. And I don't think that this is, I mean, we should have an ability to fight, but this is different discussion.
Thank you. So resilience is a very complex concept, and of course, resilience means to be able to face crises, as you've said. Tetyana, from the point of view of civil society, was there anything you would like to add if you think about the concept of resilience and what it means?
Good afternoon, dear colleagues. Greetings from Kyiv. I will switch to Ukrainian. Я дуже рада вітати вас із Києва. На жаль, протягом останньої години ми знову отримали дуже сумні звістки про те, що ряд міст України
we once again received sad news, namely that a number of Ukrainian cities, were hit by missiles during the last air raids. At least 2 residential houses have been destroyed, also in Kyiv, because missiles hit them. We are a civil society organization that works in Kyiv. We and others, well, we could actually, I think, call ourselves champions of resilience and resistance, because we have been working under this regime ever since the 24th of February, and before that also bore the previous 8 years of Russian aggression. Many civil rights organizations were engaged in documenting war crimes in the Crimea, in Donbass, human rights violations and so on. And of course we had to expand our work ever since the 24th of February. So for us, this new crisis, of course, is extremely dramatic. We are constantly in a situation of crisis, and literally in the last 10 minutes before I joined this meeting, I called my mother, I called my husband, who are also in Kyiv. I just wanted to know whether they're okay, that nothing happened to them. So every day I contact my friends, my colleagues, we check each other, we look out for each other, we check on messengers that we are still all active, that we're still alive. And of course, this also gives us a lot of inner strength and power somehow. So we do appreciate the time that we have, because nobody knows how much time we have left on this world. And of course, we want to make use of the time we have to the best possibility for Ukraine. Now, Ukraine, after being a victim of a war of aggression, has been given a candidate status to join the EU, and that perspective has given us a whole new opportunity for all those working in advocacy and who are working with human rights. So this is really, really important when it comes to freedom of speech, when it comes to protection of minorities. It opens many, many doors towards many campaigns. We want to also talk about the Roman statutes and the Istanbul Conventions. That has already been ratified. So windows are opening. And we've had a number of good moments like that in the previous years, when Ukraine signed the association agreement with Ukraine, for example, when visa freedom was introduced between Ukraine and the EU. So these were good moments in the past. Today it has been mentioned already that civil society in Ukraine is strong. That's true. We are very capable. And from within our country, even in a situation where we are faced with aggression, where we are suffering, we can be strong. So our main concern is to document crimes in order to be able to punish the perpetrators. But in parallel, we are working towards the democratization and the reforms that we want to keep pushing for. I believe our civil society and our legal rights organizations in Ukraine, well, I believe that we can compare these organizations and our society as a whole to Alice in Wonderland. She said that you have to keep running really, really fast in order to stay in the same place. And in order to get anywhere at all, you need to run twice as fast. And that's us. We are Alice. That's the challenge that we are trying to master. But
Thank you. Thank you very much. Andrei Kolikov said in the beginning that one of the tasks of this forum is also to share best practice. And so before we are looking ahead, I would like to take a look back. And Wilfried, you as a real expert on Ukraine, you have been monitoring processes in Ukraine over the last 20 years, and especially after the Maidan, the revolution of dignity. So according to a definition by the German think tank SWP, what resilience encompasses is that it is a comprehensive concept of internal and external security, that includes all individuals and the whole of society. I think this is also goes back to what Sergey has already said. So if we talk about resilience, it's not just about security politics, it's really also about the state of society. And so, Wilfried, where have you seen successful examples of partnership between state and civil society in Ukraine to strengthen democratic structures and rule of law?
Thank you very much. I would say at first, I would like to say what is resilience in my mind. Resilience is if you have nothing and make much of it, nevertheless. And the Ukrainians told us how to make very much of nothing. And that begins with civil military stabilization. Look at battalions who were founded after beginning at the war around Kyiv with civilists. Look at Kharkiv battalion founded by a Ukrainian writer, Sergey, who is also well known in Germany. And that is a challenge for our resilience because we, for a certain time, did not know how now to promote and support these new forms of resilience because we have to rewrite our stabilization programs. We have to become more adaptive and reactive, what the Ukrainians show us as new role models, how a society can be resilient. And I think one of the roots of that success that civil society as well as the state, actually when it comes to defense, when it comes to humanitarian things, are very well cooperating, has its roots, for example, in the self-governance reform, yes? And I think that is crucial. That is, I think, the most crucial reform for the stabilization of Ukraine when it comes to short-term stabilization and to post-victory recovery, because the Ukrainians showed that they can very well self-organize, that they can identify very effectively their own needs if you give the society local ownership. That is very important. And I think that is crucial for everything we will now do with Ukraine, that the recovery process should have the communities as very deciding actors, yes? And what I have in mind that the donors should be able to give them finance resources for their need directly and not through mediation institutions of the state, yes? That they can really, in the spirit of self-governance, effectively and very quickly decide, and they can they have the power to do that, what is now needed to survive. That is the first question. And then to do a post-victory recovery, which should not be a discussion about a new Ukrainian Disneyland, as Marie-Louise Beck puts it very precisely, but it should be really a very practical approach, which actually uses what we already have in Ukraine and very quickly. And I think that is one of the things. And the other thing is, of course, when we put it a little bit more wider, also a very active civil society. I think we have already, and I mean, for that processes we have, also with our army procurement and other things, all these positive changes in rule of law, yes, anti-corruption fighting. I mean, look, for example, that is a very important example, the higher court of anti-corruption, yes, very important because you see that civil society in Ukraine, in cooperation with donors and the government, is successful when you build up something new and not so much repair the old things. And I think what is now about in Ukraine, even now in that situation already within the war, is to build and to continue build a new modern Ukraine, which is already modernized very much, and not to imitate old things. And that is a challenge of the war. The war now is centralizing all decision-making process in Ukraine. That is unevitable. That would also happen in Germany. But together with that, we have also very much not finished institutional reforms. And the challenge is now that the cooperation we have between civil society on the one side and the state on the other side, which is functioning already quite well in the humanitarian sphere, in the stabilization sphere and all that, that should be also continued when it comes to have a civil society which should have an important voice when it comes to the crucial parts of the reform process and actually of those priorities which are already now strengthen a country at war. Thank you.
Thank you, Wilfried. So let's talk about post-victory recovery. And Georg Ziegler, with this, I come to you. While the Russian war in Ukraine continues, donors are already drafting recovery plans for the country. In May this year, Ursula von der Leyen, President of the European Commission, as you know, announced the platform Rebuild Ukraine, a platform that is developed for the reconstruction of Ukraine. Then in July, Switzerland hosted a recovery conference in Lugano. And at that time, during the conference, civil society organizations published a statement with the title, European Commission must guarantee a meaningful role for civil society in Rebuild Ukraine. So, Georg Ziegler, are there any mechanisms that have already been implemented to ensure the participation of NGOs in the recovery of Ukraine?
No, thank you very much. Also, thank you for inviting. I will come to this question in a moment. Just want to have the same right as Wilfried to also give my take a little bit on what resilience is first, but I'll do it very quickly. So I think there are three things important for resilience: is that you accept reality, in the sense that you don't escape from reality, you face a challenge. The second is that you have a deep belief in this case, in that the Russian war is not acceptable, and that you want to defend your country, or you want to defend democracy, as Sergey said. So deep belief is part of in values, etc., is part of resilience. And the third one is the ability to improvise. I think that also belongs to resilience. And I think for Ukraine specifically, I would add another one, is the moving to action quickly. I mean, if we see that a missile hits an energy plant or something, which unfortunately happens, I think even today there are again attacks. What the Ukrainians do, after 1 hour, they start repairing. So, I mean, this is specifically coming on top of the three things I mentioned, this very quick action and just not giving up, just trying it again. Of course, they need support for that, etc. So sorry that I just wanted to add this to resilience. Now coming to your question, yes, you are right. Civil society, and we were very much involved in this. We're invited to Lugano, and there was also in the Berlin conference. There was not much about civil society. There was another focus, but the next day there was a big forum organized by German Marshall Fund in Berlin, where also Commission was present. Indeed, I mean, in our concepts for platform, there is civil society has a strong place in it, and what we are now trying to do in this like first phase of the platform, and also I think the focus changed a little bit from this more long-term reconstructions where we thought we could basically start relatively soon. Now this has been overtaken a little bit by the extreme need for money for Ukraine, for the budget to save Ukraine from going down financially and from declaring bankruptcy, which would mean hyperinflation, which would mean printing money. And you have heard our President von der Leyen in Berlin the other day at the conference. He announced 18 billion euro next year, so 1.5 billion every month just to the budget of Ukraine, to the treasury. This is now one of the main priorities, because even if Ukraine was successfully militarily but would go down financially, that would be very, very bad, and it actually reconstruction would not work in a country with hyperinflation. There are more than enough examples in history that this is extremely difficult then. So this is now priority number one. Priority number two currently is to help with the repairs. I mean, we see the missiles, we see the Iranian drones. The interceptions are higher and higher. So Ukrainians, thanks to our weapons and the American weapons mainly, they are now in a position to intercept 50% or 60%, 70% of the drones, of the missiles. But still, there are more than enough hits. and they destroy so many things. So we need now to make it possible to repair, to rehabilitate. This is not yet reconstruction. This is just to make it possible that there is water, that there is heating, so that people, Ukraine stays a place where you can live. We have seen now the Russians left Cherson. They destroyed basically the water infrastructure, the energy infrastructure. So basically, even for these people there, it's very difficult, and one cannot even dream about people coming back if it's cold, and the winter is of course now really starting. So this is basically from just planning and starting reconstruction. We are currently quite away from that. We are now dealing with these two priorities, which is relief, which is a lot of money to the budget of Ukraine, and it is helping them with repairs and with rehabilitation. And in this one, we are very much engaged with the international financing institutions and others, and with many states who want to contribute. So the full-fledged reconstruction work, I think this is not for much later, but this is not what is now the need. And the Paris conference, which will happen in 13th of December, the next kind of reconstruction conference after Lugano and Berlin, will actually, on request of President Zelensky, deal exclusively with short-term needs. So do first things first. I think this is what is now very much at stake. Of course, civil society plays an enormous role. We have mobilized this year 125 million euros for civil society organizations in Ukraine who have been extremely active in community relief, in assisting, delivering emergency assistance, in providing fuel and power generators, strengthening, helping with education, helping children, etc. So a lot of, let's say, social activities, one would say, and on top of this, of course, the human right and media is something where our money was very much needed to enable the civil society organizations to deal with the war crimes, in the sense of collecting of war crimes evidence, fighting disinformation. It's a very important thing where without civil society, of course, we would not manage, in the sense that the government alone cannot do this. And also what is normally, of course, the role of civil society to also have a controlling function, to monitor the expenditure, etc. That's something very important. And already the engagement in reconstruction is also part of the role of civil society, and we are happy to work with civil society, and we are supporting civil society to fulfill.
Okay, thank you very much, because I think this is very important, and we might come back to this, because one side is, of course, giving money to civil society organizations to be active, but the other one is to integrate them into processes of controlling what's going on or drafting plans. But you may come back to that during the discussion. Karin Krokstäde, we have already said that resilience encompasses all spheres of politics. And if we talk about collaboration of civil society and politics, usually what comes to our mind is a social sphere, education, maybe the sphere of environment. But when it comes to foreign politics, I think the role of civil society is still very vague. And I think it is interesting that still during the Minsk process, in March 2020, the international platform Civil M+, so the organizers of this forum, they called for an independent group of civic consultations for the Minsk talks on Donbass. I mean, we no longer talk about the Minsk process, and of course the EU itself was not really integrated into it, but still, if we have a look at a call like this, integrating civil society into foreign politics, so where do you see the role of civil society in fostering EU foreign politics to support Ukraine?
Thank you very much, and good afternoon to everybody. I'm so sorry not to be in Berlin, but I'm very, very thankful to you to be part of this discussion. If I could answer the question with one word only, I would say everywhere. But let me develop it a little bit. And also, it's very difficult to come in after all these distinguished colleagues, but I would also like to say that on resilience for us, resilience is also how to use to the best possible transformation through a crisis. And this is, of course, what we all work on. When it comes to the role between, or the meeting points, the cooperation between civil society and foreign policy, I think that it cannot be underestimated. You know our lines when it comes to what we are working on, when it comes to foreign policy and the Russian war of aggression against Ukraine. For many reasons, also, I should also remind that this is something which for us is so important, first and foremost for the Ukrainian people and for Ukraine, but also for the whole international world order. We just cannot accept the way that the UN Charter in international law has been blatantly spat at. Now, the way politically, this is all part of the political response, I should say, because it's of course much wider, is about isolating Russia internationally. It is about imposing sanctions, restrictive measures to all those who in one way or another are making this war possible. I should open bracket, no, we don't have sanctions on food, whatever disinformation you may have heard. And it's also about supporting Ukraine and the region in all possible ways to the full extent necessary and for the time it takes. For the way I would see it is that the civil society role in all of these strands is important. When it comes to one of the big things we're working on, which is disinformation, we need support from the civil society also to ensure that the propaganda that we see is not all over. But more importantly, another important strand is also that of accountability. We are looking to evidence collection, but also to ensuring that anybody involved in these war crimes will be held to account and made accountable. And there too, the role of civil society will be absolutely crucial. Finally, of course, civil society will remain an extremely important interlocutor. Also, perhaps sometimes as a reality check. Of course, we, our regular counterparts, as it were, would be an administration, because we are an administration, but we need civil society to remind us also when we are or are not on the tracks there where we should be. And I would there like to thank also the civil society in Ukraine and the region, where we've had so much work, for instance, in the Eastern Partnership strand, where civil society has been absolutely key to take work forward.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Sorry. Yeah. So a last comment from your side, yeah?
No, I'm fine. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. We might come also back to the concept of the Eastern Partnership later on. Sergey, if I'm correctly informed, you will have to leave us in 10 minutes. Is that correct? Okay. So one more question to you. Eva Quistorp has already mentioned that there is a need to have a special look at women in the situation of war. And as most of you may know, Germany has its first female Minister on Foreign Affairs, Annalena Baerbock, since December 2021. It's in December 20, yeah, December 20. 21, yeah. Okay, and ever since she's been in office, she has stressed the importance of feminist foreign politics. Berlin also hosted a conference on this behalf in September this year. So my question to you, Sergey, is what is the meaning of feminist foreign politics in the context of the war in Ukraine?
I think that everything has its time and its place, and we can talk about kind of the conceptual, theoretical underpinning of foreign policy. I think it's very important, and there are also discussions on what it means and what kind of things it comprises. I don't think that the Ukrainians and ourselves have time for these very, kind of very conceptual things. It's time now for help, and it's time for addressing those who are affected, and affected are women in very many cases. There is a sexualized torture taking place everywhere. There are, of course, multiple cases also of rape on the occupied territories, and we still have a lot of occupied territories. And to be honest, apart from all the other things, I think, and this has always been my position, we have to deliver effective weapons so that the Ukrainian army can liberate occupied territories. This is the main contribution for our humanitarian causes, because things that are happening there are out of our and out of Ukrainian control right now. So maybe I'm a little bit too emotional about this, but I think this is the main point. Our main contribution to protecting those who are helpless, and especially women, and many women and children, is to provide weapons. So number two is also to work with those who fled and who are people who are refugees. In many cases, I meet with them also in Germany. I talk to people, I talk to those children who are traumatized, and especially, of course, for women. It was important, and it's still important in many cases if they manage to escape timely, also securing evidence, giving the affected women an opportunity also of psychological support, not forcing them, even if not explicitly, then implicitly, to keep silent about the sexual violence that they have been subjected to. These are all things that we as member states have to do, and actually the European Parliament had a whole resolution on that, on the situation of women in this war. In many cases, I mean, it is a little bit late now, but at the early stages, there were questions, for example, in Poland, regarding also medical help, and also regarding abortions. That is a very precarious legal situation in Poland, for example, for those women who were subjected to sexual violence and who couldn't, in many cases, not in all cases, but in many cases, they couldn't get the right advice on what to do and how to go about this. So a lot of homework that should be done, and that we should be continue doing. But from my perspective, maybe it's a very male answer to female problems, to say we need more weapons. But in my case, I think that it is important to support Ukraine in its fight to liberate occupied territories. We will see how many crimes like that happened in the Kherson region that has been liberated, and probably many more is happening now under occupation.
Thank you. I think one can do one and maybe the other simultaneously. Yeah. So before I
Absolutely.
before I open for questions from you, Tetyana, since you're a human rights activist and you are, I think your organization also documents war crimes. Does a certain feminist perspective, is it important in your work, or to stress the agenda of female in a time of war? Is this anything that is of a special importance to you or for your work? And maybe do you have any expectations vis-a-vis EU foreign politics in this regard?
За це питання. Я, мабуть, не відкрию секрет, якщо
Thank you
скажу,
very much for your question. Probably it's not a secret, but when I'm telling you that most of the colleagues who are working in my organization, but also in my entire field, are actually women. We work together as a civil society. We work on different fronts. We are documenting war crimes. We are working with government when it comes to investigating these war crimes. We are criticizing government also that not all the reforms that have to do with human rights have already been implemented. And we also work to support those who are at the front. So volunteers that are supporting the front line are also often women. I think today we haven't really quite understood how this war is going to change us and our society. Many Ukrainian women have done everything to secure survival while their men are fighting. For example, maintaining small shops, little enterprises, businesses, all of those things are on the shoulders of women. Many women also left the country and are trying to establish a new existence abroad. Of course, we're hoping that they'll return to Ukraine after the war. We are hoping that the feminist perspective will reveal itself over time, and we're hoping that this will strengthen the women's movement. Let me also say something about my colleagues, the women who are fighting on the front, who have joined the army. They are carrying weapons, they are defending our country. And some of those women are journalists and human rights activists. Marina Yelitchenko, who is a lawyer and who advises victims of the time of the Euromaidan, and who represented other women who needed support during that period. All these women are fighting together with men, defending our country. So therefore, I'm convinced that after the war, which will end with Ukraine's victory, by the way, we will regain our territorial coherence. We'll regain the territories that are now occupied, and Ukraine will do a lot more to then.
Thank you. So I invite you for questions and comments, and Roberta is, and we'll collect some questions. Yeah, please.
Hi, Dave Elsford, Human Rights House Foundation, Geneva. Quick comment, quick question. Quick comment is, it's a little unfortunate that a panel discussion focused on strengthening civil society and policymaker engagement in the context of a conference on Ukraine only has one Ukrainian civil society representative, which I think is unfortunate. But maybe to my question, and this is particular to the representatives from the European Commission and EEAS, one of the things that we hear a lot from Ukrainian civil society partners is, while they are working diligently on war crimes documentation, on documenting human rights violations, these sorts of things, that there is this need, of course, to also go home at night and work on donor reports and things of that nature. And I'm curious if the European Commission representatives if there's any kind of discussion around striking a different balance between taxpayer accountability and the real needs of civil society on the ground when it comes to troublesome reporting requirements and so forth. Thank you.
Thank you. I think this will be a question to you, Georg Ziegler. Yes?
I don't know who was the first.
Yeah.
Yes, I would also ask because it was
sorry,
almost
we will collect the questions
Okay.
and then.
But it was almost not audible. So the microphone, people should speak more. It was almost not audible.
You probably did not turn off the translation, the interpretation function. Because if you turn it off, then the sound is fine.
Okay, I hope you can hear me. My name is Inga Luther. I work for the German women's organization Oven e.V. And I'm very thankful that you brought up the topic of feminist foreign policy. I want to mention two things. There's a UN Security Council Resolution 1325, which is there already for more than 20 years. So this is 22 years, and this is the ground really for not only for the protection of women in times of war, but it also calls for the participation, and this is a very important point, that civil society is one of the pillars of really defining what should be the political direction of work, and that it's in this sense women have to really be taken very seriously. And more recently we are working together with other civil society organizations in a network, and there was a policy paper published recently. It can be found on the website of the Heinrich Böll Foundation of the GWI, where there is a very clear definition what feminist foreign policy can mean, and it explains a really transformative approach, that it really means to change the whole political system and the system of power distribution. And I would really recommend to read this paper and to have this expertise that is already there. Thank you.
Thank you. Anna-Karin Krokstäde, maybe you will be able to comment on that. And yeah, so we'll collect two more questions and then have another round later on.
Maybe you allow me to make a short comment only to my old friend and colleague Sergey, who is following me 20 years later, after I had to be with colleagues in the European Parliament in the time of the war in Bosnia. And what you will know, and some of you will know now, is there are many links in between the war in Bosnia with the mass rape and the heavy question of Europe, are we intervening militarily or not? And for the Green Party it was very heavy, are we using weapons or not? So for me personally, I want just to say to the younger generation here, like the lady from Owen now, please use all the instruments which have been built up within the European Union, within the European Parliament, within the UN, because of the war in Darfur and the war in Rwanda and the war in Bosnia. There are instruments my generation has been struggling for, my feminist and peace generation has been struggling for, and you should use them now as quickly and strong as possible, and look into the budgets, and that you don't have to deal with too much bureaucracy. The resolution 1325, I am ready to tell you about, that has many follow-ups. The other thing is, Medica Mondiale is an organization which came out of the war in Bosnia with the mass rapes of women. And so women in Bosnia and the Balkans and women in Europe, doctors, therapists, psychologists, teachers, and so on, are working together, and they get money from the European Union and from the Foreign Ministry. So look into Medica Mondiale, and then we can go on to fight this war.
Thank you. And one more comment or question, and then we'll give back to the forum, to the panelists.
Hello, I'm Peter Allemon. I'm Belgian, and I'm here sent by the NGO Promote Ukraine from Brussels to represent them. Among the things we do, we organized a protest at European Parliament. We organized a protest at the NATO. We had a march of 8,000 people in Brussels in March. We had a concert of 6,000 people in May. And we do a lot of advocacy and manifestations. We closed down, or helped close down, the Russian supermarket Meer in Belgium. And we had an action which resulted in Belgium cities not buying their petrol from Lukoil anymore. I am Belgian, which means that I'm volunteering for an organization which is mainly consists of highly educated Ukrainians who are from the diaspora, connecting with refugees in Brussels. And as a Belgian, I perceive that Ukrainian civil society, at least in Brussels, has difficulties, and that's not their own responsibility, with both the mission of Ukraine to the European Union and the Ukrainian embassy to Belgium. And what I perceive, I'm a political scientist, is that there is a huge generational conflict among young Ukrainians, who are many of them here as well, both volunteering and representing other organizations, and an older generation who has difficulties to accept yet or understand or get involved in a new form of civil society. Now, my question to Ms. Krokstäde, I hope I pronounced the name right, and to Herr Ziegler, who of course knows the Brussels environment very, very well, is that if I remember during the talk of like the last 10 minutes, the word new and new ways of civil society was mentioned very, very strongly and stressed. How is the European Union going to help the Ukrainians, and this even can be placed in a feminist discourse, to overcome an intergenerational conflict, of which, and this might be also a feminist reaction, the biggest victims often from a feminist perspective are not only young women, but also older women who are not often as well represented. Now, that's another discussion. My question deals with how overcome the intergenerational issues within Ukrainian civil society. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. I briefly want to come back to the comment why we only have one representative from Ukrainian civil society organization here. I mean, we take the perspective of the EU in this panel, especially. So, Georg Ziegler, I think I give the word to you first, and I think the question that you did not really understand refers to the strict regulations for documentation that NGOs have to do when they get funding, and if there are any new mechanisms, maybe. I think this was the first question. Yeah.
Yes,
so.
yes, yes. No, I think we have been trying a lot to cut red tape for civil society organizations. For example, we are not right now doing any more calls for proposals, but we can do direct awards. We have done a crisis declaration which allows us to do so, and we are also funding retroactively, which normally is not possible. So even if civil society organizations have done already something, we can in many cases fund them retroactively. These are all let's say efforts to accommodate and to support the work. When it comes to post facto then reports, of course here what we do is if we can extend the deadline, but I don't think we can do a waiver and say you don't need anymore to show us how you use the money and what did you use it for, etc. I mean, there are certain limits to what we can do, but we have done, I think, a lot to cut red tape. Thank you.
Thank you. Carin Krokstäde.
Thank you very much, and thank you to the several speakers who brought up the aspects of feminine foreign policy and women to this debate. It is extremely important, and it's also very timely because actually yesterday the European Union adopted Council conclusions. In other words, the member states together adopted Council conclusions on women, peace and security, in which the situation in Ukraine is particularly highlighted. The impact of Russia's war of aggression is highlighted, but also the fact that Ukraine, even during this time of war, is making efforts to implement the second national action plan on women, peace and security, which I think needs to be remembered. On our side, what is important for us to do is not only to how shall I say, to focus on women, but also to ensure that for any issue we deal with, we think about the impact it will have also on women and girls, which is actually, as we know, extremely important also for men and boys. There is a lot of research, we can go into that later if you want. But what I do think is important to remember is therefore that we need to have women around the table at every single step of our work on reconstruction, on recovery, and on rebuilding, transformation of a resilient Ukraine when Ukraine has won the war. And that presence is important for Ukraine also to continue to win the peace. So that would be one of my points. I would also like to thank Promote Ukraine for the important work which is being done on the issue on how EU can help Ukraine to overcome an intergenerational issue. I would not allow myself to dictate anything there to Ukraine. What Ukraine knows is that we are certainly there to provide support, but we are not there to dictate. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think just a comment from my side, I think we should keep in mind that recovery plans will not start when the war is over, but do already start now. So the integration, inclusion of civil society and of course within civil society of women is of course something that should start, I think, right now. Tetyana, would you like to make a comment to what has been said just now?
Так, дуже дякую. Я би хотіла сказати кілька важливих
Yes, thank you very much. I would like to add some important comments which concern our society. At the beginning of this war, of the full-fledged invasion, when I went to Europe several times in order to carry out advocacy for us. And in March, I was asked some questions by the different donor organizations on how can the Ukrainian civil society in exile be supported? That includes those who left the country, and they started to implement seminars and supported us to establish an Ukrainian organization in Poland and to work there. Actually, that was a bit strange for me at that point, because the Ukrainian civil society did not actually want to leave the country. Most of the organizations stayed in the country and continued their work, regardless of the problems they are challenging, they are facing. And today, several missiles hit Kyiv again. They hit, among others, also 2 residential houses right in the center of the city. But it is very important for you to know that we will stay here and that we will continue our work. There are different organizations, many initiatives, and we're even growing and intensifying our work in the course of the war. Coverage, reporting, this is no problem for us. Of course, we document all of our projects for all of our donors. And of course, we are also very grateful if the documentation is made easier for us, but we, of course, do that. NGOs in Ukraine have transformed. Many of them are working online, and they are very up to date when it comes to digitization. I am sure that the 2 years of the pandemic have helped us a lot to establish an online way of working. And now, with the war, with everybody being dispersed in the country and also abroad, it is much easier for us to cooperate, and even if we are not together in one office or in one city. And I think it is important to also speak about this war and this third wave of the Russian aggression, because this war has led to a new climax of the development of the Ukrainian civil society. We saw that in 2015 already, when there was a large wave of voluntary work and support. And part of this movement has institutionalized, and new initiatives have emerged in different fields like human rights, like the organization Vostok SOS or Crimea SOS, media, human rights. Many organizations were set up, and I think that the same is going on at the moment. So there's a large wave on consolidation, of solidarity. The society is very strongly supporting each other. And I'm very happy about that, because we're really facing such a huge wave of tasks. It is clear that the existing organizations will not be able to cope with that. So I hope that many new organizations will be established. And of course, we also want to cooperate with decision makers from politics. I hope that there will also emerge some new leaders in civil society who will be able to cooperate with politics, as happened after the Maidan. And maybe they will also become politicians, because this will also strengthen us and will help us to bring about reforms.
Thank you. I think this is what already happened after 2014, wasn't it? That people from civil society went into the parliament, and yeah, so you're expecting kind of new wave of that. Wilfried.
Can you hear me? Yes. I only want to the question of the man from Geneva something. So there is some change, and for example, Germany initiated in Warsaw a stabilization hub, which is also supported by European Union and has been now developed. It is still in development, but why was it made? It was actually made that we can avoid bureaucratic structures in order to implement immediately very important things, from the water infrastructure to electricity, but also to so-called transition help, so where you connect humanitarian help and already recovery help by using civil society organizations. So that is a very good example, which should be more developed, more financed, because we can very flexible, even when it comes to financing civil battalions to protect territories and to protect life of civilians in newly liberated territories. That is very, very crucial. Why is it crucial? Because we have still a gap between the financial flows of international different institutions and organizations on the one hand, which is come to Ukraine in a big amount, and the problem that in Ukraine we still have the problem of absorption, so that actually these great volunteer organizations, which Tetyana mentioned, can make use of it. So that gap has to be closed. We need platforms also to qualify further, to make capacities for NGOs who have to accommodate to the war, yes, to use their experience and to make them strong, to empower them, and also then to bring in local ownership. And that is on the way. There are already good examples. We are working successfully with that, but I think that should be much more on that. Actually, to have a preliminary preparation for the real recovery process in the late time. Another thing is very important for communities are the so-called regional support countries. It's an idea which came from Ukraine, was adopted by the stabilization leaders, Germany, US, Japan, and others, and also European countries, that you have in different cities on the horizontal level, a coordination and need identification between civil society of the local community, the community itself, the local stakeholders, and the donors. And that is now, I think, what we really have to promote. Second point on women. I mean, what we need not anymore are resolutions and all these theoretical seminars and all these things. What we really need is to have formats to bring in affected women concretely in the participation in conflict resolution. What Inga Lothar mentioned. And in the Minsk process, there was really a lack of that. We tried to do that in the end of the Minsk process, and I think if there would have not been the war, could been established, it was already agreed, a protected channel for women organizations, not because we looked on the theory, but we looked on the very particular conditions of the conflict on the ground, and without big theories and resolutions, and very concretely how we can bring women at that time from both sides, from people beyond the contact line and from the controlled territories, to work together on good things which are making also people more resilient and bring unity between the concrete Ukrainian women. That was something what showed me we should be more concrete here, not too much theory, but work. And when it comes to practice, it is still a tendency that for all conflict resolutions, we use big Western mediation think tanks. What we should more use are concrete NGOs. For example, Ukraine has a big mediation landscape, a women mediation landscape. No one knows really about that. We should take them and not contract only Western organizations who are also important for the Crane corridor. Very great, yes, very good. And you need these professionals also, but we should more go for local things. A last point on foreign policy, I think, very concretely. I mean, I was shocked at the 24th of February, but I was not so much surprised. And why was that? Because, for example, we had a big strategy group on Black Sea region, and we made papers on that. We saw already how the things became worse and worse. And why we could do that? Because we had a very close connection to Ukrainian think tanks and monitoring groups. And what is, for example, the first step for your European foreign policy to do? To integrate these great monitoring networks which we have in Ukraine, to integrate in a European context, to make them more strong, to connect them with powerful European think tanks that stakeholders cannot avoid to speak with them. So to really make them powerful as a powerful voice, that is very needed on the European level.
Okay, thank you. There were still several questions, so we will have a second round, and start here in the second row immediately. Yeah.
I will give it back to you. Yes, thanks. My name is Katarina Hertel. I am from the Secretariat of Civil and Plus. And coming back to the topic of our panel, I mean, I really like how the discussion evolves, that we talk about feminist foreign policy, but if we are very specific on this resilience concept and what should be done, maybe each of the speakers could say one or two factors to strengthen the resilience of the EU in this context of the war. Very concrete, would you maybe just, chip in, each of you, from your perspective? And what's the role of civil society? And what's an added value of cooperating with civil society in implementing that one or two specific factors? Thanks.
Thank you very much for this question. Yes, so we go further in the fourth row. Yeah.
Thank you very much. My name is Anastasia Juravella. I represent European Prison Litigation Network. This is an international organization for the protection of prisoners' rights. And I would like to give a short comment to address it to Mr. Ziegler. There is a problem now of electricity shortages in Ukraine, which is extremely detrimental for the work of everyone, but also for the work of civil society organizations. And I would like to hurry you up a bit with your initiatives. I hope they will be successful and will be swiftly implemented in Ukraine to provide for funding and opportunities to buy power station, to buy those necessary equipment and Starlink subscriptions and everything that is necessary for civil society organizations to maintain their regular activity, especially for the small ones, because of course the big well-known organizations are capable of having €1,000 per month subscription to internet, satellites, but small ones that might have such a budget for several people in the group, it's almost impossible for them to maintain their work, and this is one of the aspects that will help save the Ukrainian civil society organizations, and now it is crucial.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you very much, but for this very concrete and very important suggestion. So we go further, yeah.
Thank you. I'm Julia Choucan, a sociologist, University Paris, Nanterre, France. I would like to follow up on what Wilfried has said, and we'll have a question for the representative of European Commission, because we're thinking about how to empower local leadership, and there is a reflection going on within these circles of international donors. Principles, there are some principles of empowering locals, but if you go on the website of the European Commission Directorates General for European civil protection and humanitarian aid operations, you will see that you have 200 organizations that are allowed actually to apply for grants and to conduct some relief work, emergency work in different contexts. But if you go through actually the list of organizations which are allowed to apply, you will find, of course, humanitarian non-governmental organizations, but they are organizations of member states. So my question would be, is there any reflection in a way how to empower, really empowering actually, and giving the right also to Ukrainian NGOs to apply directly for those grants actually, for money available, not going through these intermediary levels of international organizations, European NGOs, which also of course act and help, but what they bring actually is diminished in terms of money brought to the country also. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Are there any more questions? So we have 2 more questions. So here one question now, and then from the online. Yeah. So please be brief.
Yeah, my name is Felipe Daza, a human rights advocate. Well, I had the opportunity to cooperate with Tetyana from the beginning of the war, and we have been discussing a lot on the importance to maintain resilience in the occupied territories. So I would like to address one question to Tetyana, so if you can share with us how we can maintain resilience, for example, in Crimea and other occupied territories right now, what are concrete instruments, concrete strategies we can support to support activists and maintain resilience in these territories?
Thank you very much. And the last question is from the online, from Katerina. She also needs the microphone.
Thank you very much. The question is, beside military aid and humanitarian efforts, who is able and willing to work on peace building, violence prevention, conflict response and transformation? How do you plan to ensuring the humanitarian development peace building nexus in Ukraine?
Thank you very much. And I have one additional question to Karin Krokstäde, because you have mentioned the Eastern Partnership. And this, of course, is a concept of, I think, 2009. And of course, the 6 countries encompassing the Eastern Partnership are going into very diverse directions. So are there already any concepts of either reforming or substituting the Eastern Partnership by new schemes, of course also taking into account that Ukraine and Moldova have received the status of membership candidate of the EU. So, Georg Ziegler, would you like to start, please? We had several questions, and do just select the ones that were addressed especially
Indeed.
to you. And of course, we had this one question by Katharina Hertel to all of you. Yeah.
Yeah. No, indeed. Thanks for the questions. Just to maybe clarify this, most of our money which we give to civil society organizations, we give to Ukrainian civil society organizations. Means we have a delegation. It's like an embassy of the EU, and they are basically normally before the war they organize calls for proposals. Now they go straight, and our organization can write straight to the delegation and can ask for money. And of course we have to be selective a bit, but as I said, instead of 10 million per year, this year we spent 125 million, so it's more than 10 times as much. So I think we are normally not going through international organization. That's rather an exception. So we are really strengthening Ukrainian organizations. We go sometimes through big organizations that then give the money on to very smaller organizations in Ukraine, but these are normally always Ukrainian organizations. So just for clarity, and you just need to contact the delegation of the European Commission in Kyiv. Then the issue of electricity shortages and what can be done means what we are doing is one thing, and it was mentioned. We have this crisis response mechanism where member states and even companies from member states, they donate in-kind assistance. And there have been many diesel generators and other things being donated. What the EU does, we pay the transport then to Ukraine. So far, more than goods valued for 450 million euros have been donated so far, and they are then brought to Ukraine. We also have set up a fund with the Energy Community Secretariat in Vienna. We have just given them 5 million euros, and they have raised now 25 million. There will be more to buy goods that are necessary to repair the energy system. So there are also Ukrainian officials sitting there together with others from the EU to help them select. And we're also speaking to industry, which is very important, because some of the spare pieces, it takes a long time to produce them, and we actually asked to skip the queue sometimes, so that they first serve Ukrainian orders coming in when they order specific pieces necessary for this, with Siemens or with other big companies. So I think here we do quite a lot. Also with our, let's say, limited funds, we have provided civil society organizations and municipalities in direct contacts through our decentralization project, where we reach out to many municipalities in Ukraine. Of course, our funds are limited, but we have been doing that, and we have been providing these power generators to many municipalities in Ukraine. I think when it comes to the general question of Katharina Ertel, of course, if you speak about strength and resilience of EU, what does EU mean? Which level do you mean? I mean, EU is a lot. EU is EU institutions. EU means member state. EU means basically everybody. EU means EU citizens, means municipalities, civil society, etc. Difficult to now speak about which level, but I would say in general, definitely fighting the Russian disinformation is something that's overall very important to strengthen resilience on the EU side as well, and of course to become less dependent on the Russian energy supplies. That's something, of course, member states are already working very hard on. That's just two examples to strengthen resilience. Thank you.
Thank you. Karin Krokstäde.
Thank you very much. In the interest of time, I'm going to be very, very short, but I'm happy to engage afterwards with whomever on these questions. On Eastern Partnership, the Eastern Partnership was never meant as a one-size-fits-all or as a straitjacket. The Eastern Partnership is a frame within which relations to the EU and among partners can vary. And under current circumstances, I would nearly dare to say that the Eastern Partnership is more important than ever, also to bring this platform for all strands of society, whether officials, whether civil society, not only between the six countries and the EU, but also among each other. And this is another aspect not to be forgotten. So we see the Eastern Partnership as something which will continue to be very, very relevant, and which doesn't replace or change other bilateral relations. This is an additional regional relation. On resilience, it is true, it's a big word, and we can talk about it in very many different manners. When it comes to resilience for Europe, I would like to say that there are a couple of things, and they also point very much to the importance of civil society. We need to have very flexible societies, because the world today is very, very different from only 10, 15, 20 years ago. Our societies are much more diverse, much more complex. So we need a flexible approach where we can read context differently. The other point is that we need a bottom-up approach. Every resilience needs to be based at the local level with local ownership. Otherwise, it's bound not to be sustainable. And the third point, and thereby I'm also echoing Georg Ziegler, is we need political awareness in the society. Without an understanding about political, social, and economic realities, resilience will never be able to work either. And there too, I'm reaching out to civil society for their role in ensuring this. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Wilfried, very briefly, if I may ask.
First thing to you, what you said, I mean, you spoke about those gaps where very often support is not done. And I think what I said, that hub in Warsaw is actually something for you, because it would be also able to directly cover things which are not on the horizon of the big organizations and even make your organization work further. So maybe we can speak later on that. Second point, I mean, put it Eastern Partnership, put it another name. What we need is an approach to the region, a strategic approach. And that means security. What is with security? That means connectivity, but I mean hardcore connectivity. I mean, European Union, what was the problem? On the one hand, you had a very great project in Georgia for a deep sea port, what would have big importance for Georgia. That was affiliated to that institution. Other things were affiliated to that institution. What we need really is a coherent approach how to stabilize and develop also security of our neighborhood. Without that, name it as you want. But we need a more coherent approach to that and to bring very good instruments also together in a coherent program. Next point, Katarina, I think when it comes to cooperation, actually when we see the challenges now with the accession process in a war with a highly centralized political process, I think we really should speak about what we, for example, had with Serbia at the beginning, yes, when we had a triangle of donors, of EU, and of civil society council. And please let me remember, Vučić was, of course, not very amused of that, but if you look at the achievements in Serbia, they came actually from the initiatives of the Civil Society Council. And that is, of course, also a challenge for Ukrainian civil society, because you must organize the process. The EU cannot do it. They need a demand from your side, also from your official donors. So you need to find some people who can address it. But I think we really need something in that times, actually, where a civil society has a really protected voice, to have also a space, a neutral space, where we can also in the time of war address things in domestic politics. That is not only true for Ukraine, it's also about Moldova and Georgia, where we can address that. And I think I let it here. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Tetyana Pechonchyk, you have the last word.
Дуже дякую. Я би хотіла, власне, відповісти на те питання, яке було
Thank you very
адресовано.
much. I would like to answer the question that was addressed to me, the question on how those organizations of civil society can become more sustainable and more resilient, those which now work under the conditions of the occupations. I have some recommendations. First, we have to increase the level of security for civil society organizations. This contains three components: digital security. Organizations have to take digital security seriously, and they have to implement a certain digital policy, acquire licenses for working digitally, and also train their teams in the field of digital security. My organization took this question very seriously. We started on this topic in 2014, and we were able to sustain a part of our team in Crimea, and we were able to continue our work there. We thus were able to document human rights violations there. We also became victims of cyber attacks. However, none of these attacks was able to reach their target. So we were able to continue our work in the occupied territory of Crimea. The second component is physical security. The organizations have to have safe offices, safe against airstrikes in cellars or other places, and they also need protection vests and helmets for working in the field. I remember how difficult it was at the beginning of the aggression to find these means. There was a large lack of security clothes, and that it is very important and continues to be important to talk about that. And the third component is legal certainty and legal protection. This is particularly important for the initiatives which are active in the occupied territories. It is important for them to have lawyers because they risk very much. And after the last wave of hostilities of the Russian Federation on lawyers in Crimea, their work became even more difficult. They were deprived of their licenses, they were detained, and people are afraid, and less lawyers are ready to cooperate and protect the rights of their clients. A second step that we have to undertake in order to support civil society organizations is to prevent burnout among their teams and to support the people who are working on the consequences of the armed conflict. We have to ensure that these people are able to continue their work and that they will not leave this field, that they will remain a part of civil society. The protection of their health is particularly important. The events that they are facing at the moment are very dramatic, and people react differently in situations of stress. Some people are even hospitalized and need high-quality support and treatment. Unfortunately, our colleagues and the organizations do not always have the possibility to pay for insurances. Smaller organizations don't have this possibility, but big companies can pay the medical insurance of their employees. That is why it is so important that the donors keep that in mind as well. A fourth aspect, which also has to do with the former ones, has to do with flexible financial support. It's about the costs that organizations can adapt very easily to their own needs, and these costs should not be linked to concrete targets, because the targets and the conditions in which the organizations work change very quickly, and the organizations have to react very flexibly and quickly to the changing situation and the problems emerging. That is why we need a flexible financing. And the last aspect is readiness to face new challenges. Today, we talk about the winter, which will become very hard. And we already now work in a state which is completely unusual. Our colleagues in Kyiv work without power. They look for places where electricity still works. Just today, there were again attacks on Kyiv, and again there were power outages. Now I am talking with you, but electricity can be cut off at any time. We bought a generator for our office, but the need is so high, the need in power generators, and these generators have to be installed within 1.5 months, and it is not possible to buy generators in Ukraine. We have the money to buy these generators, but many organizations don't have the means to do that. And while I am talking about the challenges we are facing, one of them is also our readiness to continue planning. If the energy infrastructure is under attack now, then transport infrastructure could be the next. And we also have to be prepared for that. and then generators will not even be delivered. But already now we have to think of what we can do when our...
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for these very concrete suggestions in the end, and also for stressing that flexibility is really important. This brings us also back to the concept of resilience, because without flexibility, societies, politics, etc., cannot be resilient. Thanks very much to our speakers, and we'll have a coffee break now and continue at 5 o'clock.